Well, I'm a retired teacher, so if
Oh,
you
you
step
are?
up to me, you'll be in the front of the room.
Okay.
You fill up from the front.
All right, there you go.
But see,
Okay,
she said, oh, no.
I like this spot. How's that?
That's beautiful.
I'm a nomad, so if I sit back here, I can go out the door and go to the presentation.
That's okay.
I do have one question for you. So this one doesn't seem to come up. Even
F and the seeds. It's probably the
S.
on the end of the seeds.
Let me double check it. Is it stored out experimental?
Experimental farm
Okay,
network.
great, got it. Okay, so we have all of them pulled up.
Beautiful.
Okay,
And then I'll get the rest.
pardon?
And then I'll get the rest for these speakers.
Oh, this is not my own. This is,
Is
So
this
maybe-
not day 3?
no. Oh, wait, this is early.
Oh.
So this is, let me show you. It's session 2. It's after lunch.
Oh gosh, okay.
No, you're fine. 2A.
Section 2,
Yes.
2A. Okay.
Yes, so it's only from Nell and Boneeta.
Okay.
Just want to correct, Boneeta or Boneeta?
Boneeta.
Boneeta. Okay, I'm correct. 'Cause so
It's
just Boneeta.
and Furman.
yes, I'm talking about.
Okay. And then Furman's is they set the presentation to
Right. So that's what I'm gonna.
Okay.
I'm gonna just ask her to resend it to me.
How are you today?
See, you're gonna get excited.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is for the speaker. There's only three.
There's only
There's
three.
a moderator too.
I'll leave 4 just in case.
I like this.
Other room?
So this side is the only one. Okay, so
This is my partner.
Hey, so that's us too?
yes, so we have two others.
How are you?
Right. Yes. So we're kind of just one side.
See Farmer now first. Let's see.
Then
It was set to E.
I knew you initially wanted to speak, but we received your presentation now, so we can do that after, and then we have questions.
So we just have the introductions and then we
Yes.
go to questions.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna go up there, I'm gonna welcome everyone, speak about the session, that description. And then I'm gonna introduce you guys with the brief, like the founder, you know, what you, why, what you're the director.
Sent to me.
And then I'll say, well, let's take a minute to introduce yourself and speak on the work that you do, right? So then you just give like a brief, like maybe 5 lines.
Oh, it's
What
a
you do, and then we start with your presentation. And then after that, if you want to do questions after, like usually for the audience meeting, because we're more interactive, you can do that. And then we can go to this presentation, and then you can get the questions for Paul. Sounds good? Okay.
Hey Sam,
Of course.
did you do the other rooms?
This mask has me
Yeah, it's like.
Did you hear me like, which room are you in?
You gotta talk to this whole-
I'm like, breathe. Okay, I'm coming now. I'm like.
Yeah.
Talk on its own.
Here you go. Right there. This
Yes.
is the last one you were looking for, right?
Yeah, so it's just 2 presentations.
Yep.
Okay.
Put that back in. Arielle, who are you starting with?
I'm starting with Boneeta. Yeah, so she's gonna,
This is coming up as a Word doc. It's downloaded.
so, yeah,
Oh, that's PDF. There we go.
yeah,
So, okay,
perfect.
that's fine. Now
Right, and then
that's
these
it.
are first, yes. Okay, perfect. So.
Yes, please.
Next tab, next website, so she can understand. Can, sorry. Would you prefer October to March? Because she's gonna go. Next. So maybe stay here.
Yeah.
Oh, I can do it.
It's whatever you're more comfortable. Okay.
Okay, you can do it. I'm first introduced. Right, I think we'll wait just a few more minutes, just so we can start on the hour. It's 1:57, but thank you all for being here. Okay, great. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Arielle Wharton, and I am a faculty assistant here at the Center for Community Engagement, Environmental Justice, and Health at the University of Maryland. Welcome to Session 2A, Food Sovereignty in the DMV. We have two great panelists here to share their work and speak on how we can further advance food sovereignty in the speak on and discuss ways to just improve, advance, and speak about the food environment here in the DMV area and how that can expand internationally. So I'll just give a brief description of what what the session entails and what we can learn about. Studies examining the food environment have found that low-income neighborhoods, urban neighborhoods, and/or neighborhoods that are predominantly African American have less access to supermarkets than wealthier neighborhoods, neighborhoods that are suburban, or predominantly white neighborhoods. In many segregated and fragmented urban areas, the lack of access to health-promoting food resources creates a food desert or food swamp, which is exacerbated by limited transportation opportunities for these populations. Unfortunately, food deserts and food swamps are only symptoms of a larger problem, a broken food system. Many Americans are dealing with food inequities due to the system of food apartheid in this country. The lack of access to healthy food infrastructure
contributes to the production of obsogenic environments and contributes to disparities in metabolic conditions, including diabetes. Now, during this session, speakers will share the latest information on the extent of food insecurity throughout DMV communities and how these issues disproportionately impact youth, young adults, seniors, African American residents, and other vulnerable groups. Speakers will also highlight actions that are being taken to address these problems, successes, challenges, and lessons learned. These panelists will discuss the future of food access in the region and the need for more investments in food sovereignty to eradicate food insecurity. Now, I'd like to introduce our two panelists. Boneeta Adeeb is the president and founder of Steam On Board and president of Ujamaa Farms. We also have farmer Dominic Nell, who is the founder and owner of City Weeds. Please, I'd like you to, thank you. Please, panelists, would you take a second to just further speak on the work that you've done, or just further into what you hope to improve within the food environment?
All right. I think I will go first. Can you hear me? Yes, very good. I started this work as a descendant of farmers. My family has been farming in the United States since 1710. And so I was taught to believe that farmers were geniuses. They knew everything. They knew mechanics. They knew the water. They knew botany, biology, chemistry, animal husbandry. They knew it all. Everything they knew. And if a farmer was successful, they were able to protect their families, protect their daughters, and to support their children and send them on to college. And that was the family that I was blessed to be born in. Yeah, they were enslaved, but they somehow didn't seem to manage to believe that. They always saw freedom and the future as the way in which to go. So as a part of my work, you want me to start here or just to do an overview?
Yes. That was perfect. Yeah.
So my journey has led me to multiple organizations, multiple work, and I'll talk about that later.
Perfect. Farmer Nell?
I might as well speak without the Sorry. So, thank you. My name is Farmer Nell, Nell. As you said, the owner of City Weeds. I also have an extension business called Be More Green, which is a grocery store and a health store in the middle of what's classified as a food desert / food swamp, things of that nature. Really a tough act to follow, but I'm glad for the insight and for the perspective that she just given me about farmers, because I teach high school agriculture as well. And through that, I'm able to teach the students pretty much every subject. You know, if they're having trouble in English, I can talk to the English teacher. We connect math, especially, you know, as she speaks of STEAM, with the schools in the inner city of Baltimore. I have to create a stream. So we have to add R to ours for reading. And so reading is an assumptive that STEAM and STEM programs assume that youth can read. And we live in a screenshot society where the youth can look at the Lakers jersey and identify that that's a Lakers jersey, but still spell the word Lakers wrong. So planting seeds of independence and thrivability is the City Weeds motto. And we happy to get into that further once we learn something from my colleague.
Well, thank you both for those instructions. Honestly, I've just learned so much from those simple words. Farmers are essentially also teachers, and teaching the youth to not only plant literal seeds, but planting seeds of education, prolonging life, etc. So we're all excited to be here, and let's begin, shall we? Okay.
Thank you. So what you'll see is it says free seeds there. And if that's a pop-up, okay? So this is my organization, STEAM Onward. My work evolved out of my cultural work. I am a lover of music and dance and art and all of that. I was working with the National Association of Multicultural Education, using art and music as a way to motivate kids. That seemed to work. A few years ago, they came to me and said, yeah, we like giving Black history programs, Latin history programs, Asian history programs. We need jobs. We heard the jobs of the future are in STEM. So at that point, it was like, okay, let me change my game. I listened to kids, let me look forward. And what happened was, we began to organize the communities in Southern Maryland. I'm down in Southern Maryland, which is Charles County, Prince George's, and Calvert, St. Mary's, that region, and even Southern Arundel is considered part of our region. And so we got health officers together. We were at that time suffering from tobacco-related diseases. Tobacco was a major crop in the state of Maryland. And in Charles County, where I was working, even the queen of the fair was Queen Nicotina. Tobacco ruled in Southern Maryland, and it still is a major crop in a lot of places. And so we were up against a culture of people who believed that tobacco was their way of life. But of course, for my people, it wasn't so beautiful. And I come to find out that most of the Native Americans who lived in our region were sharecroppers, were forced to work from Kansas City in the morning, even out of after slavery. They were still working in the fields as sharecroppers. So growing food, farming in general had a negative connotation. You're probably dealing with that too, but the negative connotation. What we did was we realized so within agriculture, every single occupation could be studied. So you talked about reading, Well, in order to get people to want to read, you got to give them something that's of interest to them. You have to motivate them. And so what we found by giving some simple things I'll talk more about this later, but these are seeds. By simply giving young people some seeds and letting them see the miracle of nature, within a few days, they can present something. Anybody know what this is? I wish you'd come closer because I got stuff to show you.
Yeah.
So if you could come closer.
Can I move it around?
Yeah, that's fine, but I want them to see all of this stuff. But that's fine. So can anybody identify what that is? So let me say it's something you probably use in your kitchen every day. I'll help you out by telling you it's an herb, okay? It's one of the most commonly used herbs. Maybe in the first 3 to 5 most popular herbs. It's not basil.
It's pepper? The garlic?
It's not a pepper. It's not garlic.
I have no idea. I can't.
Okay, so let me give you, it goes in an Italian mix. So if you had pizza,
Oh, okay.
you've had,
Oregano?
it's oregano,
Oregano.
but it's a Cuban variety of oregano. So it's one that we start out with because it's almost impossible to kill. So you can't water it too much or too little. I mean, I've left that plant for 2 months without watering it and it survives. It thrives. It's the only herb I have that thrives on the inside of the house, everywhere. They call it a Mexican mint, has many names. But what I found out was by simply giving kids seeds, and if you want to get it even faster result, black-eyed peas sprout so fast. Oh my goodness. And beans do too. So I can immediately prove to a child that they can be involved in a miracle of nature. And so that's what we hope to do. So at this point, I was working with a teaching co-op with young people who did not have transportation and couldn't get to their jobs. So we were able to start a farm at school. And these young people learned how to plant. I remember, I won't tell you which one wanted to know, Mrs. Adeeb, the things I learned here, can I grow marijuana? Because it's going to be legal in the state of Maryland very soon. And it's like, if you can grow this, once you learn agricultural skills, you can learn how to do it. The most basic thing I learned from kids, though, is they want to make a living. That's why they came to me in the first place. Whatever we do has to be sustainable. It has to meet the needs of the people. So with these kids, let me see. Let me show you this thing called gardening the environment. So I was working with Dr. Wilson with 17 for Peace and Justice. And I learned from the study that there were 5 things that could be done in Prince George's County to improve the environment. And the county was not too excited about it. But because I was working with high school, middle school, and community college kids, we decided to focus in on 2 objectives. One was clean water because, believe it or not, we were surrounded on 3 sides by water in Southern Maryland. But the other one is we had a problem with food sustainability. It was so funny that people couldn't even name the waterways around them. Some of them have heard of the Potomac, but none of them realized that the Patuxent was the deepest and longest and cleanest river in the state of Maryland. It had been cleaned up by civic action. Our dear brother Fred Tutman, the river keeper, did not play around. You do not mess with his river. It was a few years ago before COVID, they had won over $600 million in settlements against polluters. So you can get things done. In the work I'm doing, however, I found it very, very difficult as a teacher to get kids involved in protests. I would have to run against a lot of obstacles. So what I decided to do, because of my long, long history of holy and sanctified church-going folks, that it was easier for me to fight for something than against something. And so I realized that by fighting for teaching kids to grow things, that they had less opposition. I mean, who could oppose a program that had kids planting their own food or had kids planting trees? So as a part of our work with Howard University, we found out about Wangari Maathai. Do you know who she is? Oh, you must write her name down. Wangari, W-A-N-G-A-R-I, Maathai, M-A-T-H-A-I-I. The first environmentalist to win the Nobel Peace Prize. The first sub-Saharan woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize. Came up with a project called the Greenbelt Foundation. And their goal was to plant trees that had been destroyed by industrialists and people who would have taken advantage of people. You know, it was women's work. Planting was women's work. And they earned their money by the things they grew, they sold at market. As a matter of fact, if you're wondering why I look so amazing today, it's because I'm wearing cloth from East Africa. Yes, and my jewelry is from East Africa as well. But this is from women who would make money by selling in the market, and they were in a cash economy. Whereas there are men who grew longer crops. In West Africa, they grow cocoa yam and cassava. They take many, many months to give you a crop. Market women were trading in coins, and they had money. Their husbands had to go to them to get loans. So it was a great equalizer. You see, I guess you're beginning to notice a thread that through the power of what you can do, you can change society. We can look so long and see all the things that can't be done, but let's get busy doing something to save our people. So we talked a little bit about, particularly in Baltimore, other cities where there's been industrial pollution. And we talked about the billions of dollars that are needed to clean up those waste sites. But do you know people in Boston and in New York City are doing it with lettuce and mustard greens and collard greens that clean in fields because those green plants will absorb toxins in the soil. How much do you think it costs for a pack of lettuce? Well, I can tell you I get 3 packs at the dollar store for $1. Okay, maybe it went to $1.25 now. So it doesn't take a lot of money, but what it takes is, it takes a mentality of believing that you can make a difference. And through action, we can change, we can take responsibility and change our own societies. So we came up with this whole idea that the kids had to start a business, raise their own money. And so we started this store, an online store. So a lot of immigrant kids in my community, and they knew how to set up an online store. So from this online store, we were going to sell seeds. We were going to sell starts and native trees. We plant native trees that don't require fertilizer or insecticides or fungicides. Things like pawpaw, persimmon, Allegheny chinkapin, those and nuts. Also berries like wine berries and gooseberries and black raspberries that are native to this region. So we came up with this idea to do it, and just as we got our store up and ready to run, COVID came along and shut us down. It shut down the business that the kids had worked a whole year to start. And what happened was a dear friend of mine who was a local farmer said, well, Boneeta, there's something called a co-op gardens movement. So let me just say here, you can go and look at this on your own. We started our college kids who were, according to the state of Maryland, an essential occupation. They were able to go into the yards of senior citizens, into church yards, into community yards, and plant community gardens. And then, so those college kids did that. We got a small grant, $5,000 to set up this online store. And then we met these people for the Co-op Gardens Commission. Please be aware that this is available to each and every one of you. You can become a seed hub, so you can receive free seeds and distribute them to your communities. And using some of the strategies, and I won't go into depth, but if you look at this website, everything you would ever want to know is in here, is covered in this website. There's a university course from PhD level on down to preschool on how to grow your own food and how to farm. And so we started this work, 2,000 volunteers across the country who knew that because of COVID, this is going to be a complete breakdown in the food distribution system. They were dumping milk. Stores closed down. In California, many states, you couldn't even buy farm equipment. You couldn't buy seeds. So what we did is we set up and we took our store and we turned it into a free distributing store so that we could ship seeds to anybody who wanted them. No matter where the U.S. Post went, we mailed seeds. So our young people packed seeds that were donated by the organic seed industry. There were heirloom seeds. Let me say the difference between organic and heirloom is. Organic is how you farm, and heirloom is a variety that will reproduce. Excuse me. So let's go on to the next one. And so we found projects like this. I'm going to tell you about this one. It's so important. We found that if people were planting things that were important to them and meaningful to them, they were motivated to do that. And so we founded Ujamaa Farming Cooperative Alliance, which was a group of farmers that came together to teach everyday citizens how to grow. And eventually, this turned into a BIPOC-owned seed company. I believe we are the only seed company in the state of Maryland, or one of the few selling vegetable seeds. We are probably one of the few in the world that are selling traditionally, culturally meaningful seeds. So our goal was to tap into what was important to people, and everybody agreed that collard greens was important. Raise your hand if you ever had collard greens. Oh yeah, see, you see why we started with collard greens? Started out with that project, and that has gone completely ballistic. So what people have found us, I get so much email about collard greens. The idea is that our ancestors, when they came to this country, did not have the benefit for greens as they did for peas. Do you know that peas, do you know black-eyed peas came on slave ships? Do y'all know that?
Yeah.
Oh, see, people know stuff. Black-eyed peas and all of the southern peas came on slave ships. So did okra, it didn't have as great a place on the ships as the peas did, but it came as well. Watermelon came, these wonderful things that came, but our greens did not come. And so when we got to the Americas, we found that there was some Europeans that brought some things that didn't thrive. They brought kale, and and cabbage didn't necessarily thrive in the southern states. They kind of threw it away, and what Africans did was they collected those plants and they bred them into what you now call collard greens, mustard greens, turnip, and the greens of the South. Those were the first plants bred in the Americas by African Americans. That's why they're important to you, because they belong to you. So we're reclaiming our heritage We're claiming the knowledge that went with it. And we're using that knowledge to empower our people. You are not poor if you can grow your own food. If you can give somebody a pot of callaloo, you are not poor. When somebody dies, if you can go over to their house and take them a meal, you don't feel poor like you do if you can't take care of yourself. So what I'm proposing to all of you is that we use the power of seeds. Yes, there are some of them are so tiny. The callaloo, the amaranth, which we get callaloo from, is so tiny, it's like a speck. But with the power of one seed, we can clean up our communities. But more importantly, we can regain the power and the strength to believe that we can do for ourselves, that we can build our own communities, and we can fix what's wrong with us. And we don't have to go to people who have proven themselves very much to not care about us. Why should we always go to Master and ask him for liberation? Doesn't that seem kind of silly to ask the person who put you in slavery to be your liberation? Now, I'm not saying you can't friends. Wherever you find a friend, grab them and hold hands. But the most important thing for the salvation of our communities is to give them the strength and the muscle and the power to protect themselves and do for themselves. How many did I say that to you? I don't see what my part.
I'd say like 5.
Okay, so let me tell you about this. So we decided once we started gardening and all this, we decided we had to do more because we had to feed more people, we had to farm. And the first thing that we formed was this. Anybody know what this is? Oh, you know what it is? You know, what is it?
Sorghum.
It is sorghum. Yes, it's an African variety. Sorghum is African. It comes from the Eastern Africa. And the reason why we chose this one is because we wanted to put Aunt Jemima out of business. This is molasses. You can make syrup from it. But it's a highly nutritious, dense sweetener. Now, it couldn't compete with sugar cane because it won't crystallize. But it was grown in the United States. But it's not just a syrup. It produces a very large seed head that produces grain that can be used to make milk from grain. You know oat milk, right? You can make milk from it. You can make bread. You can make porridge and cereal. But more importantly, you can use this for making fiber. It has fiber in it. It grows like sugar cane, very tall, and you can produce it to make fiber, and you can make dyes, natural dyes for clothing. So University of Maryland School of Arts came to us and said, can you grow us natural dyes? And so all of these byproducts we are growing. So there are industrial uses and certainly can be used also for carbon sequestration, which is amazing. So it's a traditional African food that almost everybody can get with because it tastes yummy, but it also has amazing industrial use. The same thing for okra and other varieties that we are using. So what I'd like to do is inspire you, if I can, to begin to look at the power that is underneath our feet. One of our farmers does a workshop called Your Lawn is Your Salad, because you're stepping on medicines, you're stepping on traditional foods that were used as medicinals. In a minute, I might as well keep on until my partner comes back, right? Is he here?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Go ahead. I feel like.
Okay, so calendula. Anybody know what this is? Calendula. It's a beautiful flower. It's also medicinal. It's healing. There's so many. All these are varieties of herbs. Here's a chrysanthemum that was used as medicinally, but we forgot how to use it because we were so busy running away from the South. I get that. But we threw out the baby with the bathwater. All the knowledge that grandmother and great-grandmother had, we let go. Celosia, this beautiful plant, celosia, this beautiful plant that you see in historic gardens is a vegetable. It's an African vegetable. Why aren't we eating this? Why does everything only have to be for aesthetic purposes when it could be sustaining us and helping us to get strong enough to fight another day? You know, many of you know that quinoa was the grain of the warrior, the Aztec warriors. Before they went into battle, they ate that quinoa to feel strong. So I'm gonna say to you, empower yourself, learn, go deep in your own heritage, know who you are, and do not let anybody take your heritage away from you. You're not as pitiful as people would have you believe.
Wow, wow. I mean, I feel like I can speak for the entire room. That was extremely inspiring. I definitely am ready to go outside and plant something. I mean, I'm Caribbean and I grew up having to take a spoonful of molasses every so often. Did not know the historical background of it, so thank you for that. I love to learn, and I'm sure everybody's so happy to learn and learn about what we can do to move forward and just be better. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Sorry, I'm so sorry, Farmer. You are a doctor. You are a doctor. Farmer Dominic Nell.
Doing the questions and answers after I finish, or just
Yes. So because of time, I think it was more interactive just now, and you'd go with your PowerPoint, and then we'd have questions for both of you.
Does anybody have any direct questions for this young lady who walked up? Don't want time to pass. All right, for those that just entered the room, I am known as Farmer Nell. My name is Dominic Nell, but I go by the moniker Farmer Nell. And my journey to a farmer came in a city called Baltimore, Maryland, and it happened on the west side. So I'll keep talking until my PowerPoint or presentation comes up. Okay.
One second. So sorry.
No problem.
I can't even see the screen. Oh, I see. Oh, okay. Yes, no problem. Go. You can put it.
So what I like to focus on is like sustainable developmental goals. They go by SDGs, sustainable developmental goals, and they're also known as global goals. So when we speak of a city like Baltimore, ironically, the juxtaposition of that is that it's a world-class city, like, and a lot of reasons, and go on about that. But in that paradigm, you have third world conditions existing simultaneously, like action. So when we think of
You don't want it on here?
Baltimore, we like to think of the history of the world as well as globally. So I'm just gonna go into it here. I can see it. So ideally, these are 17. You might want to call it a wish list. You know what I mean? But however, we want to start with tangible goals and systems. So, like we were saying, city weeds plant seeds of independence and thrivability. So we want to think like a farmer. So a farmer thinks, like she says, almost at the tune of every single thing. Everything has to be planted, cultivated, recultivated, repurposed. All these things that go with farming technology and terminology. For me, I've applied it to my lifestyle. So ideally, the work that is being done in what we call food deserts, they wouldn't be that way if it wasn't for poverty. So one of the first goals is zero poverty. What would that look like? Reimagine that. And along with that, zero hunger. So my store, Be More Green, gives out to the tune of maybe 2,000 pounds of fresh produce a week. That's just one piece of the mission, but that goes to show you what food that is already grown that is rescued. So this is not food that I grow. And being an urban farmer, you have to be real creative. I'm dealing with obstacles like lead in the soil, having to build raised beds. The land that I'm growing on is not owned by me, but the community needs it. So it's a whole, war zone that's covered up in, I'm not afraid to say, the corruption of the Baltimore City government, police department, agencies, so on and so forth. However, I've learned that it is far greater and more beneficial for the community to fight for something as opposed to fighting against something. So I really didn't get a lot of traction in adamantly being David against these Goliaths. It sounds good. Those guys die, you know what I'm saying, early. And I don't plan to do that. That's not my plan for myself. So ideally, how do we partner with these Goliaths? How do we form, or how do the communities of Davids cultivate and galvanize together to be a Goliath? But then again, why would we want to battle that? Because then it's war, it's ongoing. So fighting for something, fighting for food justice, food sovereignty, and all of the dynamics that, fall under that umbrella is where I'm at, is where I am right. Health and well-being, number 3. Self-explanatory, isn't it? However, you have certain neighborhoods that haven't had a baseline of what health is. To say I'm eating healthy, to say I'm getting healthier, to say what is healthy. So Be More Green is my store, and what we like to say we do at that corner store is redefining the corner by redefining the corner store. By redefining the corner store, you're redefining who owns it, who's behind the counter, who's sweeping outside, what's being done inside the store, what's the store selling, what are the store hours, what's being grown behind the store, what's being done on the second floor of the store as a resource center. What is a store? You know what I'm saying? So redefining all these things. What is health? What is food? My understanding, the first 3 foods are air, water, and sunlight. So we're more like plants than you realize. We are plant-based beings, no matter how much animals your body has ingested. And things that are alive tend to, like physics, a body in motion tends to stay in motion, so things that are eaten that are alive tend to stay alive. Things that are eaten that are dead tend to die faster than their time span. We can see these examples with soil. We can see these examples with the food and fruits that we grow and eat. We can be a hypocrite when we eat it, and we go around our friends and family, and we get conditioned again. But in this area of Institute of Education, we can clearly see the mathematical equation that is ourself. Can we all agree with that? That we're mathematical equations? There's things and components that it takes to make us up, additions, subtractions, withdrawals in our systems. So that leads to quality education, which I believe is number 4. And to have a true quality education, from my learning, is to have hands-on experience. And what better landscape and platform than Baltimore City that has a landscape of obstacles for youth, if we're talking about, and specifically, but the whole community at large as a whole as well. Number 5, equality. So we want the quality education now. Number 5 is equality, equal. So it's an extension of quality. It's equal. We have on here direct gender equality. I'd be remiss not to include racial in that. However, this is a global way of thinking. So the idea of this, that doesn't even exist in this equation because it's already been solved. Because we have the power to solve it, right? Don't we? So I'll leave that there. However, we have a new frontier of information that's being translated to us that we must understand the equality of the gender as well. So that's included. We go right into clean water and sanitation. What are we drinking? Where's our waste going? Stormwater, what is wastewater? How does that affect what we grow? How does that affect what we eat? How does that affect our air? How we think? Affordable and clean energy. Wow, that's number 7. So that's one of the tug of wars of this symposium is energy versus power. How do we benefit from the modalities of both of those, as I would say. Number 8, economic growth. And where are we at? So economic growth, it says decent work and economic growth. Probably change my wording to attainable jobs, so we can have a sustainable workforce. Also, which gets included in that, which is not in there, is workforce development. And what is that? Those of us that have spent time in the South on the farm and rural areas, we understand what workforce development is. It's kind of embedded into the DNA of how we think. In inner city living, not so much. So bridging this gap between the two would be the ideal. Let me run through this. Economic growth, oh, we did that. My favorite, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Now we're getting somewhere. Now all this mumbo jumbo can start making sense when we bring it to industry. The youth is the innovation. And myself, my cohort, we have an understanding of what those infrastructures are through using experience and expertise. No, I don't have a degree in farming, per se, at all. Not a piece of paper from an institution that says that I know how to do dust and salt. I have a plethora of certifications, from growing microgreens to master gardener, all of these names of things that was just riding a different type of bicycle for me. You know, same pedals, just smaller, some are larger than others. So, you know, then we go back at number 10, I would say reduced inequality. So we have quality education at number 4, we have equality at number 5, racial and gender. Gender, as it says on there, and then reduced inequalities. So that's the circle back around to that. Hey, we can address these things, but then there's a lot of other inequalities that I didn't mention. That doesn't apply to me. That doesn't apply to my said made up gender of what I translate that as. It doesn't say. So we're talking about women-owned businesses. We're talking about redefining what equality is to understand what inequality is. We're talking about a lot of dissecting. I have a number 11, thrivable communities. On here it says sustainable cities and communities. I like to change our language to thrivability. Thrive. Like sustainability gets thrown around in the community of where I come from as the goal. That's the ceiling. You know what I mean? And for me, that's the floor. Like that's the ground. The ground needs to be fertile and stable and sustainable first before we even do anything. And so, thrivable communities and cities. I just came back from Seattle, and anyone that has ever been there and has been to Baltimore, you can see the similarities in certain landscapes, but when we're talking about clean air and clean water, there are no similarities. And just the functionality of the city planning. So that shows me that that these cities can exist with these communities and they can actually thrive as a world-class city without third world conditions. Responsible consumption and production. That's huge. That's the one that we all can take a lesson with. What do we consume? How is it produced? And what do we produce through our consumption? What is produced in that? You know what I mean? waste. How is that waste being reused as energy process? I don't want to rabble where I'm at time. Am I good with time?
Oh, you're good, you're good.
Because all of these things are of interest to me, so I could, in a non-narcissistic way, say these things and talk about them with no one listening. And so I'm thankful for those that are actually here with ears to listen. I do give thanks for that. Climate action. Do something. Something. You know, like climate change. I don't necessarily have the an adept way of thinking or solutions towards that. So that's why it says climate action. That's for you. Somebody that's studying that, that's focusing on that. How can I help that? Or what am I doing that's hurting that? You know what I mean? So now I can create a 3 to 5 year plan and maybe change what I'm doing to benefit the community more. We have an incinerator in Baltimore, which burns the trash. And in a short-term goal, like instead of versus a landfill, it gets rid of it immediately. However, it creates a problem for the city, and like the whole West Baltimore is born with asthma or bronchitis because of this air. And it's a real unique thing because you have a smokestack that is at sea level, and then most of Baltimore rises from that. So I live on Reservoir Hill in this Park Heights, and you get even higher to a hill. So most people live at this level, with incinerators at this level, smoke coming at community level. So this trash being burnt is being inhaled by the city. And so the landfills are being turned into islands at this point because they've been piling so much land on the land that it's become its own land force that's not actually ground and it's near the water. So now it becomes its own little trash heap of a boat, of a ship, you know. All of these things being said, these deal with the climate. So these 17 things that are addressing global issues, these things exist in Baltimore City. You know what I'm saying? So don't want to look like a farce or anything like, all right, well, this doesn't look like food sovereignty and like this, but this. However, in me being in the business of food justice, which addresses food sovereignty, which addresses a lot of areas of food, these 17 things overlap strategically, if not seamlessly, with food. And when we're speaking in urban environments, because she can probably agree with me on most of these things, but we're talking about urban environments, these things will happen, these things will occur. Like you're out in Southern Maryland, which interestingly enough, this year I will be teaching my first year at college of Southern Maryland.
Great.
And at La Plata,
Campus.
right. So in me studying that area, and me studying a town named after the tribe I'm from, Monkey.
Yeah, I work with them.
And so me getting to learn more about my indigenous self, that I have more than enough actual information that I know, but do I know until I actually, do my due diligence and physically, experience some of those things. So I'm looking forward to that. So in my preparation for this symposium, I made sure that I was intentionally unprepared, so I could be prepared. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I intentionally came unprepared so that I would be prepared. Also to show you like the version of me that became this version of me, that was a part of the ingredient. Now, I wouldn't, that for a scholar, I would not promote that as advice for reports and dissertations. When you're working in your passion and your mission, I would, now you have to do a lot of self-care. There's a lot of protection of oneself that only one can provide. Only oneself can provide. And in learning that, the knowledge is always going to be there. Like, all right, the photographic information, that's going to be there. Who do I need to be? What is my need? What does my being need to be in order for you to receive? I may not have said anything that you don't already know. The you of whoever I'm speaking to that's listening. However, you know, there could be energy that sparks and ignites, you know, somebody to do something when they've known what to do for years. They just haven't done it. How many of us see something that we can change in our own backyard, literally, or in our own neighborhood, or the neighborhood across town, and we just haven't done it yet? Or the thing that we could say to the person that's helping that community that they don't know. They don't know. We don't know what we don't know. Oh, why don't they do this? Why? Tell that man that. Show them what to do. I mean, humble yourself to be rejected. You know what I'm saying? Because every seed you plant will not grow. Do we take that as rejection? And I'm getting into the weeds and seeds with it. So, climate action, life below the water. We have wildlife. We have plant life underwater, life on land. That includes the animals. Number 16, peace, justice, and stronger institutions. This is an example of it. Right here, we say right now in this institution, School of Public Health, where I have a daughter who attends this school. Me, a man that attended college, did not complete college. Didn't go back and finish anything, and those papers became useless or to me. However, never losing sight of the vast importance of institutions and education. Just because the way I learned and the pathway that I chose, I wouldn't recommend that for anyone unless they want to work on the edge of living their passion. Living on, you know, you got to carry that parachute with you because you're going to jump. You're going to have a free fall. That's the life that I chose. I didn't want to sit behind a desk and do. I sat behind a desk for almost 2 decades as a student of, you know, from 1 to 20. And so that was good enough for me. I needed to actually prove those theories wrong or right. But most of the theories that I received and learned, I didn't believe anything until I actually did it. And so working with the earth and the land taught me pretty much the basis of everything that I'm instilling. So it had me look at a city the same way I look at grass and crops, the same way I look at concrete and glass and trash. You know what I'm saying? Like the environment around us. And so when we talk about the disparities of Baltimore City and the youth this and people this and all of that, I'm like, wow, if you actually looked at the corner and looked at the environment that a child has to grow up in, the smaller versions of ourselves, the smaller human being that didn't ask to be in this space has to grow up with these, you know, with Chinese food being culturally the food that they grow up off of, and it's the American version of it. We got grease, chicken boxes, corner stores that sell now and laters, tail end of the tailspin of junk food, meaning that I did a case study on the chips in Havre de Grace and the chips in Baltimore City. They don't taste the same because Havre de Grace was getting a better quality of potato chip than the ones that was going to Baltimore City. So even in the terms of junk food, Baltimore City was certain neighborhoods in Baltimore City, those third world condition neighborhoods, the ones that they want to keep that hamster wheel to spin. That's what's going on there. I come from a neighborhood that the life expectancy of a black male, man of color, is 29. The zip code that I live in, the zip code that I'm from, 29. And I've seen this happen true. My closest friends are in that age bracket, the ones that are still around that age, and those are guys that I used to mentor. Because I've been around for 4 decades plus. In that neighborhood, I'm an anomaly in that neighborhood. The unemployment rate is 40% in that zip code. We're talking, so when I saw that my zip code had enough work for me to do for the rest of my life and still would get solved, you understand what I'm saying? I was elated because now I know what I'm gonna do with my life. Now I know what I'm gonna do. Now I know what all this stuff that I learned how to do. Now I know what to do with it. You understand what I'm saying? So, and then the partnerships make it happen. And so the partnerships for these goals, it's like 17 goals, it sounds like the perfect world wish list. But not realizing that these are 17 things that have issues, right? That are issues going on. And so it's not a hard stretch that these things can actually be addressed. And the goal is 2030. So we're looking at like 8 years from now. So we're looking at there's a student that's going to come into this institution, and by the time they finish their graduate studies and doctorate and those things, that the world that we live in globally could look something like this in the Baltimore metropolitan area. So before I turn into a fountain over here, I'm going to stop right now.
I think we were just blessed today to have such inspiring panelists. Thank you, both of you. From Nell, thank you for that passionate presentation. I definitely appreciate you explaining and just further reiterating the importance of incorporating the 17 sustainable development goals as a part of your lifestyle. Everything is interconnected, everything that you do to make a change makes a difference. So thank you for that. I just got goosebumps. This was wonderful. Moving on from that, we'd like to move into the questions portion of this session. So it is around 2:53. We should be finished by 2:15, so that leaves a decent amount of time for us to have some questions. So what I'm going to do is I will ask you both a few questions, and then I'll open it up to you all to have a chance to speak with the panelists. Okay, so my first question. Oh, I'm sorry. 1 second. Right, so my first question is for Boneeta. So emerging terms such as food apartheid have emerged in the EJ sphere to discuss the cumulative impacts associated with food deserts, swamps, and other pathogenic food infrastructure. What can we do to overcome food apartheid and advance food justice? And also, what is something that you think is overlooked by most food justice advocates?
Oh, thank you. I'd like to address those terms from the perspective of being a farmer. And I'd like to talk about what a food swamp is. And if you've ever journeyed into a swamp, you know there's a lot to eat there. And there's a lot of really nutritious food within the swamp if you know what to look for. And the same thing in the desert. There's so much healing food in the desert, but what's missing is the knowledge that our ancestors had as to how to survive that. So that's why I think the term is evolved into apartheid, because I think that's what they really mean. The fact that one group of people decided that another group of people were not worthy to survive. So we're talking about social construct. And so I'm so happy they've moved away from those terms, because so much of our nutritious food comes from the desert. Beans come from the desert. Corn comes from the desert. So I'm glad we're moving away from there. So I think that as we're evolving, we're becoming more aware of the natural world.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Adding to that question, one concern when it comes to addressing food apartheid is in urban areas, which have less agricultural space, is difficulty in scaling up solutions to meet a large demand. How can we sustainably produce enough food to overcome food apartheid in cities, in certain cities, I should say?
So, individual citizens in cities around the country, such as Baltimore, I think that Baltimore has so many urban farmers. I think there's more than 50 registered urban farmers. So people are taking responsibility in their own community to solve the problem. And I think what we need to do is honor that and support that effort. So that's one of the things. I'd like to talk about what's going on in Minnesota right now. I was in Minneapolis in May visiting the George Floyd Memorial. You know, there where he was murdered, they've turned that into a square. And it's been a magnet for positivity. Even, I must tell you, there's a cloud of sadness there. I was there during the second anniversary of his death. But in that space, they have built raised beds. They're using all kinds of technology to grow food. They have plants going right there in the square. There's businesses that have formed around there that are cooperating with each other. And it's become a mecca for positivity. All down the streets and the boulevards, they built, use the public space in the streets to put in community gardens. And along the side of the curb, they've taken that space between the curb and the street, and they are putting in school community gardens there, gardens in front of people's homes. And then that food is diverted to centers that they're calling pop-up stores, where they take all that food and they make it available in a store that's free of charge, where people in need can go in and get what they want. What I love about that, though, is they're employing teenage kids to do the work. And that's just such a good use of an amazing resource that I value more than anything, which is, I just love teenagers. And they're so strong, they're so capable. I mean, we have them out there spending hours on the football field, hours on the basketball field. You know, they could be using some of that amazing physical strength they have to solve community-based problems and pay them a living wage to do it. So that's very exciting. In St. Louis, they're doing amazing work. It was a classroom teacher who decided that he was gonna take one of those vacant lots and start a garden. And he used the things that he had learned about, you know, science to clean up that space. And he started out with just one lot, and now there's movements, not just in St. Louis, but the movement has gone all over the state. They're taking the poorest counties in Missouri, and they're teaching people something that they're not too far away from. I mean, did your grandfather farm? Did your parents? Anybody have a parent that gardened? Anybody have a grandparent that farmed? See, we're not that far away from the farm. So regaining that knowledge is something we can get to. So what I'm seeing is an amazing movement going on in New York City, in Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, there's something called the World Farmers that are immigrant farmers. There's 380 farmers growing foods for their own communities and selling it as a business. So what I'm seeing is this amazing movement where individual people are taking on the mantle of progress and support. And they're believing that, you know, from being a seed saver, now these are just seeds from a plant that somebody put in a package, and I can hand you some, and that right there is about 15 plants right there. So seeds are easy to save if we just learn the skill. We can use the power of seed saving to liberate our brothers and sisters from hunger. And more importantly, what happens to your mind when you feel hungry? That emotional hunger is actually bigger than the physical hunger that you feel. So I'm really excited about the movements. And this is going on internationally as well. As people realizing that if you want a hero, you better look in the mirror. You are the hero that's coming to rescue you. And the government, as Bev said, you know, whatever they do is gonna benefit them. You know, maybe you get a little bit of squeaked out of it. But if we want power and success, it's within our own hands.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Farmer Nell, I do have a question for you. I do appreciate the metaphor when you were speaking on we are the Davids, and instead of fighting against the Goliaths, we should fight for something. I know, Boneeta, you also spoke on that. I do appreciate that. So my question to you is, can advancing food justice and sovereignty have a ripple effect that is empower communities in ways seemingly unrelated to food?
Absolutely. Yeah. That was more of a yes and no. I mean, it wasn't an elaborative point of the question, but I can elaborate on it.
I have another question to add on to that, so no problem. So in a similar vein, how can prioritizing food sovereignty in communities, particularly frontline ones, example, Baltimore City, how can that empower cities to build their resilience in the face of climate change?
Honestly, it's simpler. So like for me, like going literally around Robin Hood's barn a couple of times in the last, say, 7 years that I've been doing this work exclusively. There isn't too much of it that I haven't experienced it. For a city of Baltimore, what prevents a lot of these, which poses a lot of these questions, is that answer itself, the city of Baltimore. So, like these things are like, if I'm in fact like known for doing this work and like coined it on even food apartheid, like that sounds like someone, I think like 4 years ago that did a dissertation, I think it was from University of Maryland. So like when that was being read, it sounded like something that I said. Because like that's when people were interviewing, I was saying like that's a swamp is something that happens naturally. Desert, these are things by nature, and these things didn't happen naturally. This was not to beat around the bush, it was a byproduct of redlining. And since redlining started in Baltimore City and was then perfected in the city of Chicago, while you have your hills, your Bolton Hills, your Federal Hills, and all these neighborhoods that Baltimore does not necessarily have to gentrify itself because it was already built that way. It was already built that cities that I wasn't going to be able to buy and live in them. So it's not until now where there's money in the real estate that the door is opening. So if I have some money, I can kind of get into the game. But then I'm going to get charged potentially more, have a higher percentage rate. And then I'm going to be blind and green to all the corruption that was in the room before I even got in the room. So what I'm saying is these conversations lead to food sovereignty, land sovereignty. How do I get the land? Farmer Nell, the farmless farmer. What I say by that is I don't own all of the land that my work has been done on. So I'm a farmless farmer. I'm going to use that to my advantage and say, all right, you know what? I don't want to adopt anything. You know what I'm saying? If you're not going to give this to me or give it to me at a prorated price that makes sense for this community, then I'm going to take it into my own hands. So the good part about that is there's so much of an abundance of vacant lots and vacant houses in Baltimore that builds the landscape of it. So you can see what was created by design. So you would think that in 7 years that they would have built a whole something around what I've been doing. Not me, not to say the individual, but instead they'll silo off and break a piece of what they think Farmer Nell's beard is made out of, and then they'll create their own version of it. And they're like, you didn't even touch it to know what the ingredients of it. So that's what's happening. So my solution for that would be, working with other organizations, grant money, finding streams of income to pay people to do the work. Because as cool as it sounds and looks to everybody else on the outside, it's not cool to Baltimore per se. I'm cool. You understand what I'm saying? So I can make the shit that I do look cool, but that doesn't mean everybody's gonna want to do it. That doesn't mean everybody's doing it. No one is beat. Like I'm paying for my store with grant money and programming because no one will come in the door. I cleaned up the neighborhood so much that there's no foot traffic. So I might as well be a nonprofit because my business doesn't make a profit. You understand what I'm saying? But I'm intentionally not, because I want to say, hey, this is how you can run a corner, young man. You can own the corner and do whatever you want, and you can do 10 different things from one corner rather than letting it consume yourself. So that's a long, elongated answer, because the questions you're having is kind of like around the fence of the nitty gritty. You gotta actually come into the yard, and then maybe your question will change a little. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Get more from like, all right, oh, I see why you don't walk over there. It's muddy over there, and so we figure out how to get rid of the mud. You know what I'm saying? Or until we are unafraid to walk in the mud, to see what's going on in the mud, and not being afraid to sink. Whatever the conversation changes or whatever, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So, but to definitively say, income streams where all of this stuff of what me and her are saying will make sense, because it ends up being step infested, and I'm doing a song and dance wherever I go, and yeah, it's gonna impact something or somebody. It might spark the person that's gonna actually really make the change, and hey, so be it, you know what I mean? Because I'm not at the point yet where I'm getting tired of the work at all, I'm not. I'm tired of the bullshit, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, and what I'm saying is I'm going to different, I've been in Fort Lauderdale, Florida 3 years ago. We had a convention called the State of Black Food. The obstacles that I go through in Baltimore, well, they couldn't even understand them in the South, because for one, the South has had its foot on Black people's neck for years, that they've never even bucked the authority to create a corruptive system. So the solutions that I would have that didn't necessarily work in Baltimore worked in the South, because the infrastructure was built off corruption. So they got lazy down south, those that are in charge. So and not to hurt anybody, the people down south didn't buck anymore. When you get to a city like Baltimore, you have liberal, you have people on both sides of the equation that aren't your friends. You know what I'm saying? So that whole design leads into the vacant houses, the vacant lots. Whereas I guarantee you, if I ended up getting like that 3 to 4 acres that my family had, that I was running around on the kid and learning how to farm and all that by default, I guarantee you I would have not been a farmer. My road to a farmer came from me being a photographer in the city, teaching kids how to take pictures of artwork on the side of buildings that were abandoned, and then there was a patch of grass next to it. I'm sitting there like, yo, why is somebody doing it? They need to do this. I'm they. That was a call to action. The next week, I reach out to the ancestors. 2015, a week Freddie Gray died. So all I've done since then is wake up in the morning and move my feet, because my hands are doing things that my brain never learned how to do. Does that make sense?
I get it.
Yeah, for sure.
And that sounds crazy, but what I'm saying, these are ancestral things. Like I
It's in you.
unlocked
Yeah.
the cheat code of what was already there. And how do you learn to do this? I don't know, because I really don't know. Everything that I'm doing, like I came unprepared, because how do I prepare for something that I've never done? What do you do? You know what I'm saying? So let me just prepare me to be me. You know what I'm saying? And then the rest of it, well, it's going to be what it's going to be. And I can live with that. I can sleep at night with this being a botched situation. You know what I'm saying? Like, all right, dude, this is not what we came to see. My apologies. This is not what y'all came to hear. I apologize straight up and down. But this is, in fact, my calling and how I translate food sovereignty. It's going to always equal into real estate. It's going to equal into culture. It's going to equal into our babies. It's going, what are we feeding our kids when they're going to school? What information is in a blueberry versus the information is in a sausage? And how is that information being processed? You understand what I'm saying? Like, we really got to ask ourselves that. That's not a poke at nobody. This is each one teach one. It's like, hey, look. You know what I'm saying? That's how the Black Eyed Peas got over here. That's the braids in the hair, the cornrows, and the directions, the codes. We don't know language. Me and you don't speak the same language. How do we communicate? We were taken from the same place. You look a little bit different than me, so you got a chance to stay inside. I didn't. How do we communicate with each other? Do we just forget about each other? I'm sorry.
No. I think everybody's appreciating that. I mean, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think I can. So, no, thank you. And you said, it's ingrained in you. It's just what you want, what you feel like you need to do. And that's important. The doers, the ones who are not afraid to take the first stab, to fail and try again, no matter the odds. And I understand it is probably definitely a struggle to consistently be fighting. I can't even speak for that, but we feel it in what you're saying. We feel it, and somebody, more than one person, is gonna look at what you're doing and gonna say, wow, I didn't think of it in that direction. Well, now maybe I can do that. You said it yourself. Take a piece of your bed, not literally, of course, and then transform it into something else that can be even more important to the future. But now in this day and age, I think as we speak on the youth and the youth being the mold for the future, the younger generation is all about doing it their own way or doing it a different way. And I think it's important that we have leaders showing different ways we can achieve successful routes. So with that being said, I will stop this question portion, and I will open the floor to maybe one or two questions, as we are a bit short on time. Okay, so one and then two, and then maybe. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. I'm blown away, and I'm new to the EJ movement, so I'm so fortunate to learn from you all today. But I'm curious about, especially you, Arne, in Baltimore, what pushback have you received from local government as you're striving to do something that may go against maybe some of their interests, definitely with some of the commercial, obviously, grocery stores or whatever? I'm just curious about what pushback from government, but also even from community as you introduce fresh produce and that type of thing to sometimes our community, we're not used to that. And so just curious what that looks like for you.
That's an awesome question. So the government, I don't particularly go to them to receive, so they're already pushed back to me. Now there's ways to go through policy where policy can make a difference. So let me start with that. With government, I've figured out my own pathway, where it's like, all right, people are gonna help you once they see that you're able to help yourself. The pushback I would say I've gotten from the mayor's office is them knowing exactly who I am, the work that I do, all the way down to me being the fly on the wall that takes the pictures of certain events, because I'm still more years a photographer professionally than a farmer. And then I'm applying for these grants or these opportunities or these boards of EJ and Food FJ and all of this farming out. And you would think that I would have retired, or you would have think that, someone didn't like me, but because why is it the name of the business being said now? All right, let me take it away from me. But when I say farmer now, that's still the business name. It's not Dominic now, because everybody loves farmer now. Not everybody likes Dominic now. I know this, so maybe it's the Dominic now part of it. Maybe it's like, all right, yeah, he's really Dominic now, so I don't know. But if they're believing in that work enough to create committees and money and open up streams for that, then you would think that there would be some more shoo-ins or coming to me. I'm like, hey, I'm on North Avenue. I'm the only black-owned grocery store. Hey, I'm the only grocery store on North Avenue, which touches nothing but disenfranchised communities. And I don't have with a self-proclaimed vegetarian mayor that's never been there. And I give out free produce because no one is buying it, so it's actually cheaper for me to give it away. So it's cheaper for me to give away food than it is for me to sell it, because I'm not going to sell it at the capacity that I would need to make a profit. So the community I wouldn't say I don't get pushback from the community, but that's the arena that I throw myself in with the students that I teach, with the little younger kids, with the neighborhood. So Meatless Mondays, we just did this past Monday, so I gave out 100 carrot dogs. That's what I call them, carrot dogs. So I put carrots on the grill, marinated them, and put them in hot dog buns, and I gave them out to the community in an open air airway. And so like, okay, a market that had been closed, the doors have been closed because of safety and things of that nature. I just wanted to open up the culture, like we'll open these chains and these locks, because it keeps our brain in that state of mind of where some terrible things probably did happen. Like that was 15 years ago. Let's do something different. Let's put something different out there. So it hasn't gotten over the hump where it has critical mass. However, when I'm out there in that setting, I'm able to handle those questions. I'm able to, hey, try, the pushback is who's up next. Because if me doing more things like this, I'm not going to be able to do that and this and then still make a difference and have an impact on it. So I don't know if that answers the question. The pushback from the government is like, I would say again, is me applying for these grants and these opportunities, and you know, it's just not getting any traction. And then it becomes discouraging at that point. So then I stay away from that, like, you know, that pushback from government. Like, all right, I'm just not even gonna go over there. I'm gonna just do it over here. Take a long way. I know that they're not gonna help, or their help takes long, or their help is late, or their help has excuses, or their help is gonna come with micromanagement. I don't need that. You know what I'm saying? So, sorry.
Great. Okay, one last question. Yes.
Hi, so I'm actually from Boulder City as well. Obviously, I don't look like most of the people in my community, but the food justice is still a really big passion of mine. So how can I enter that scene without looking like a white knight stepping on your guys' feet?
Well, for me, I invite everybody. This is, if we have to put stuff in the categories, like the heart of the Black community is a Black woman, female. Then I will say this: you want to get something done, like in community, you also gotta have that white woman there too, because they represent a sense of privilege that we don't have. I'm gonna just put it to you like that. So in me having to say that statement, I have to pay homage to the source. However, everyone has value, and I've tokenized myself to get to this opportunity. So I've used myself as whatever. So I've numbed myself down that I don't even know I'm the monkey in the room at that point in time, because it's not about me. It was about the community. So I had to get in the room. So if I'm going to get in the room at this, I'll do all of that. Now, who's going to fight? Who's going to galvanize with us? You know what I'm saying? And realizing what you can do as a state of privilege. So there's no way around what you're saying. Now, if that's not who you are, people will get that that's not who you are. However, that can be helpful to a community if you know that that's who you can be also. If that's you know what I'm saying? That comes down as a qualification of sorts to get something done. All right. You know, if you're standing next to somebody, that whole situation can change, because now you see a white woman standing. That's just we're talking about Baltimore. Talking about Baltimore. I'm not talking about the University of Maryland. I'm not talking about the world. I'm talking about her neighborhood in Baltimore, how she sees herself showing up, and how it can look different.
But that could be true anywhere.
Absolutely. I didn't want to subjugate it.
Yeah, let's just be real.
Okay. Right. So like that being said, so what I would say to you is we can connect. I have a food stream that we always look for consistent locations to get food, and you would just be that cool abolitionist white lady that helped the community get food. You know what I'm saying? Like from a small term, from a larger term, knowing that you have that privilege and bending the universe to make it happen. Like even if you can't relinquish it until we start looking at things differently. It's always because it was created like that. That's not something you can say, "Yeah, I'm going to give back my white privilege." You know what I'm saying? Because at some point in time, if in that choosing criteria of a system, it's still going to exist. The fact that I'm a Black male is still going to come into some sort of paradigm. The fact that when I go to the airport, they don't know what I am, so I'm going to deal with all types of stuff. You understand what I'm saying? My last name is Nell. It's like, what is that? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? And then I look like I'm dealt with more racism in my own community than I did in the white community. If we want to talk about racism and racial slurs, I was never Black in the Black community. You understand what I'm saying? But I was always Black around white people. You understand what I'm saying? I was never Black in the Black community. Please understand that. I was from Rico to Chico to Ben Latin to Roy the white boy to now Nipsey Hussle to he's still half African. So it's like and to them that's not Black and then so I just go with indigenous. Realize that most people of color are of an indigenous nature, and we're talking about a melanin scale that there's a start and then there's a spectrum of one end of the spectrum and the other end of the spectrum. And ether and hair and all of that has to go with it. So skin being lighter with straight hair and skin being darker with coilier hair, that's science. The genes are more dominant. It makes sense why the less dominant genes flip the scripts to flip the power. It's an arm wrestle. Now, what do we do with that now that we know that? That's all I'm saying. You know what I'm saying? What do we do with that? And I go on and on about that.
Yeah, I'm usually in the reverse situation where I'm the one black person in the whole room that's white. That's normally my world. And what I say to white people, and I get asked that question every time, is show up. If it's something you believe in, show up. You know, that's how you prove your point. It's really not so much what you say as the fact that it's what you do. But is that true for all of us? Isn't that what it's really about? What we do? I mean, are we always just gonna talk about the problem? Are we gonna get busy and do something about, be about the solution? And the whole idea about the value added part, we're really looking at value add. How can we take this and do 10 things with it instead of one? And so, you may not realize the power that you can bring to the project. It's just your presence adds value. And it may not be fair, it may not be right, but it's probably true. So show up.
Okay, with that being said, thank you so much. Wow. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you panelists. This was wonderful. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the sessions for the day and just love each other and do better. Thank you.
The next speaker, I was just like, I gotta figure that out, but I wanted to say I appreciate y'all because y'all kind of helped me.